Hello everybody and welcome to another album review. Today we are taking a look at the brand new album from Thy Art Is Murder titled Dear Desolation. So for those of you who may not know much about this band, they are a deathcore band from Australia, and I believe this is their fourth album so far. I really like their music, especially their last couple of albums, Hate and Holy War, which Hate got a lot of praise and gained them a lot of attention, and Holy War was still good, but I don't think had quite the same effect. But both albums are great albums, and I enjoyed them both a lot. And of course now they have released another album titled Dear Desolation, released on the 18th of August 2017, which is the date that I'm recording this video. I've listened to the album once in its entirety, along with several of the songs I've listened to a few times. So I haven't listened to the entire album through more than once, but I have listened to very many of the songs several times. So I think I've listened to it enough to have an opinion on it and all of that. So I'm doing a review, and we're gonna start out with stuff I liked about it. So the first good thing about this album is that everything sounds good. The quality of the sound overall is very good, and then the quality of the music itself is also good. The guitars are well done, and the drumming especially is well done. The drumming in this album is a little insane. And the vocals by CJ, as always, sound very good. They sound a little bit different. I feel like he pronounces his words a little differently in some parts, maybe a little more clearly, and I'm not sure if that's what it is or not, but something about his voice just sounds different from their past releases, which is not a bad thing at all. It still sounds very good. And as I already said, the guitar work is very good. I think that a lot of the guitar riffs in this album are very well done, especially in a few songs like Slaves Beyond Death, the title track, and Puppet Master, which I personally thought had some of the better guitar work on the album, although I think every song is pretty good as far as that goes. And like I also already said, the drumming in this album is very good. It's always been good with Thy Art Is Murder, but when I listened to this album, I was hearing it and listening to the drumming, and I was like, that it's pretty good drumming. It's very fast and technical and all that. It sounds like it would be very difficult to play, but when you watch like music videos and performances and all of that, it seems like it's just natural and very easy for the drummer, which is pretty impressive, I think. Another thing I liked about this album and really about Thy Art Is Murder in general, is the lyrics. While I don't personally agree with some of them, because as weird as it might sound, I'm a Christian who likes Thy Art Is Murder. How weird is that? I don't always agree with their lyrics, but they are very well written, very interesting to think about and everything. And I just think that their lyrics, while I don't always agree with the message of them, are usually pretty good. And the final thing I'd like to mention about this album, as far as things that I enjoyed, is that there seems to be a little bit more of a death metal influence on this album, which of course makes sense because they play deathcore, which is a blending of like sort of hardcore music styles and death metal. But on this album, it seems to be a little bit more prevalent than in their past releases. Not that it wasn't at all in their last couple of albums, but this one just seems to have a little bit more death metal style to it. And one more thing that I'd like to mention that I actually don't have written down is that there's not a lot of variety in the music, but a little bit, which keeps things interesting. Some of the songs sound very similar, some of them sound very different. For me personally, I thought the last song or two, probably more the last one, which is The Final Curtain, more than both of the last songs, has a little bit of a different sound to it. It seemed a little bit different from the rest of the album, which is always good. I like a little variety in there, especially in this sort of genre of music that tends to sound very samey between songs. So that's all the stuff that I enjoyed about this album. Now I do have a couple of things that I didn't like about it. The first thing is that about some of the breakdowns, because of course this is a not a death metal album, but a deathcore album and a deathcore band, and so it's going to have some breakdowns in it. And while some of them were pretty alright and enjoyable, a couple of them were honestly a bit boring. And particularly the one that stuck out to me is the one that happens about halfway through the song Death Dealer. I thought that everything that led up to it was really great, but then when the breakdown actually happened, it was kind of boring for me. I'm not really a fan of like really slow breakdowns, which is what this one sort of is. But it just didn't really catch my attention that much, and I feel like there was a lot better breakdowns on other songs and other Thy Art Is Murder songs in general. Another thing is that while I did enjoy the vocals and I think they were very good, there wasn't a whole lot of variety, and while he does have a very good growling vocal sound to him, it would have been nice to have a little bit more variety. It's not a huge problem for me because it still sounds very good, but it's still something that I wanted to point out. And my last bad thing about this album is that it, for me, seemed like it ended a little bit weak. Not that the last song or two, or however many it is, probably I would say the last song, The Final Curtain, even though it is a little different from the other songs, I feel like is just ends the album a little bit weaker. It's not a bad song or anything. I think every song on this album is pretty good. However, it just ends a little weaker, especially compared to some of their other music. Like, I think Hate ended a lot better than this album did, for example. And especially compared to the way the album begins with Slaves Beyond Death and The Son of Misery, which are two fantastic songs. The Final Curtain just kind of is sort of a meh ending, I guess. It's not a bad song at all, but it's just not quite as good of an ending as I would have hoped for. So those are all the points I wanted to make about this album. Overall, I would recommend it, and I think that it is at least Thy Art Is Murder's second best album. I think it's a little better than Holy War, but I'm not sure if it's as good as Hate. It might be, it might not be. But I think Hate and Dear Desolation are fairly close, I think at least. It is kind of hard for me since it is brand new, and it'll probably take a little bit more listening to it for me to determine which one I for sure like better. But overall, this is a solid album and a good addition to Thy Art Is Murder's discography. And if I had to choose a few songs that I would say that I enjoyed the most, and I would say are my favorite, it's actually a pretty difficult thing to do because there's several songs from this album that I really, really liked. I would probably say my favorite songs from this album would be Slaves Beyond Death, which is the first song, the title track, Dear Desolation, and The Son of Misery, with special shoutouts to Puppet Master and Death Dealer. The only thing that sort of brings those down is, well, first of all, I just don't like them as much, and then Death Dealer would be one of my most favorite songs from this album if it wasn't for that sort of not great breakdown that I mentioned earlier. But every song on this album I think is pretty good. I just think a few of them are better than the others. So overall, I think this is a great album, and I definitely think you should check it out if you're into deathcore or the band Thy Art Is Murder. If you enjoyed their past material, I'm sure you'll be able to enjoy this one as well. So that pretty much wraps up this review. In the comments, tell me what you thought of the album. Did you like it? Did you dislike it? What would be your ranking of this album in comparison to the other Thy Art Is Murder albums? Are there any songs from Dear Desolation that you think I should have given a little more love, and anything like that? Let me know in the comments, and that pretty much wraps up the video, so I'll see you guys next time.